You've heard the saying, there goes the neighborhood. Well, tonight think here comes the neighborhood, because all over the region, the city, the county, the suburbs, there are neighborhoods, sometimes places that people gave up on, that are succeeding, stabilizing, coming back. Is it the schools, the churches, the housing, the diversity, the businesses, the microbrewery maybe? Well, in many cases, yes. What makes neighborhoods work and why?
And on Stay Tuned, you drive the discussion. We bring local experts, journalists, and civic leaders together to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Tweet us your insights on tonight's topic, and you've got a seat at the table. With a few national experts and a panel of community members, this is the show bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. So stay tuned.
Well, good evening. I'm Jim Kircher. Casey Nolan, he is still in Russia covering the Olympics. So I'm here talking about, well, where you live. Why do you like it? Why don't you like it? Why did you go there? Why are you thinking about leaving? The discussion is also obviously on Twitter. Stay tuned STL, that's the hashtag, so please, we want your input on that. And we're kind of starting off today with some of the research that's been done by Todd Swanstrom at the University of Missouri St. Louis. So we're not just talking neighborhoods, we've got some research. A lot of times we talk about decline in the city. You're really talking about neighborhoods that are succeeding or coming back or being stabilized. You use the term rebound. Let me ask you, what do you mean by rebound? Is that something you can really measure, or is that just like a gut feeling this place is coming back?
Well, that's a good question, Jim. And we have a definition, a scientific definition of what a rebound neighborhood is. We have a vitality index where we look at the per capita income, the poverty rate, and the vacancy rate, the economic, the social, and the physical. And what we say, a rebound neighborhood for us is a neighborhood that between 90 and 2000, or between 2000 and 2010, picked up at least 10 percentile in its ranking in the region. So these are the neighborhoods that I think will surprise some of your viewers, that they are bouncing back. We call them rebound neighborhoods.
I think a lot of people, you know, I looked at some of the things that you guys were writing, and you were looking at from 1970 to 1990. I think a lot of people are stuck in that period of tremendous decline, and maybe not aware that since 1990, things have begun to shift.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at the data, the 70s in St. Louis were so hard on the older parts of the region. You had loss of industrial jobs, you had the turmoil over the urban riots, and the kind of sense of really of collapse of many of the urban areas. But in the last 10 to 20 years, and I think it's actually picking up some steam. Many of these older parts of the region are bouncing back. Young people are moving into these neighborhoods, empty nesters. People are looking for pedestrian-friendly environments. They're looking for a place where you can meet people at the corner coffee shop, or maybe perhaps a microbrewery, as we'll find out later, right?
Yeah.
So there really is, it's a very complicated story. I don't want to give you the impression that every neighborhood is coming back, but there are a surprising number of neighborhoods that are bouncing back.
As we looked at your map, you know, a lot of times we talk about, say, the same old neighborhoods, you know, Soulard's coming back, or Central West End, which is in the study. But you're also finding things in Valley Park, in Belleville, Swansea, Granite City, Afton, Florissant, and not just the city, but some of the factors are the same going on there, and we're going to be talking about a lot of those things. We're not generally talking, we're talking, you talk about census tracts, but generally not entire communities or towns, except in the case of Maplewood, and I think that's one of the things we're going to focus on first, because Maplewood's a really good case study for what they've been talking about, and so that's where we sent Anne-Marie Berger.
It's very appealing to people who can say, I'm going to stroll along the street, I'm going to have dinner here, and, you know, maybe I'll pick something up.
Hank Weber, Vice Chancellor at Washington University, and Todd Swanstrom, Professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis, have recently collaborated on a study exploring changes in the urban core neighborhoods in St. Louis over the last 60 years. This included the city and inner ring suburbs on both sides of the river.
And the neighborhoods very roughly follow a set of patterns. You have neighborhoods that were strong in the beginning and stayed strong throughout. Kirkwood, Webster Groves.
And there are those neighborhoods that became weak after World War II when St. Louis lost industry, particularly on the north side of the city. But they paid specific attention to those neighborhoods that saw periods of distress and have come back strong in recent years.
All of these older parts of the region are feeling a cold breeze, we might say today, right? There's a cold breeze sweeping across the older parts of the region. In the last 2 or 3 decades, it's not as rough, and we're seeing more neighborhoods kind of kicking back, what we call rebound neighborhoods. So I think that there's a real story there. What are these rebound neighborhoods, and what explains why some rebound and others don't, and what does it mean for the region?
They focused on the Central West End, Botanical Heights, Mark Twain, and Maplewood neighborhoods. And they say while no neighborhood has the same formula for success, some drivers for revitalization are good schools, walkability, dense populations, close proximity to employment, and diversity.
In the past, diversity, neighborhoods that were integrated were viewed as a disadvantage, and there was a notion that there was sort of a tipping point, right? If you get a certain percentage minority, eventually the neighborhood will tip and become all minority. That does not appear to be the case in the neighborhoods that we've studied. It seems like there's diversity is far from being a negative, is a positive. I'm not saying that we're over racial issues, right? But that I think it's much more nuanced and complicated than it was before.
And that's what people want to move into these neighborhoods as well, because they want that neighborhood feel of that's the place I go to eat on Tuesday, or that's
Right.
where I grab my beer on Wednesday.
Right,
And that's where I see my neighbors too.
Right. Weber and Swanstrom also talk about third spaces, places people can gather, relax, work, and socialize.
Take the Schlafly Bottle Works, for example, in Maplewood. This restaurant and brewery isn't just a gathering place for the people that live in the neighborhood. It also draws people from across the region into Maplewood.
Bottle Works, we sell beer and we sell food, but we're also kind of a community center. We're a drawing place for a lot of different activities, and it brings people from all over. And it really has anchored the community. So when we throw big events and parties, it brings people from all over the city, and then they go walk around the neighborhood. So they'll come to one of our beer festivals and they'll walk up the street and they'll go get local chocolate and local pie and local donuts, and they'll drop into the local boutique shops. So anytime we're doing something here, it benefits the whole community, and then it works the other way around as well. So it's been a really nice symbiotic relationship.
And that makes Maplewood stand out. Rob Bierenbaum owns 23 buildings in Maplewood. In 1999, he was part of a group that worked to pass an ordinance that requires all businesses on the 7,200 and 7,300 blocks of Manchester be retail only. The theory being retail breeds retail.
To me, the ordinance was a really important thing because we weren't ready for retail stores to come flocking to Maplewood at the time, and they didn't just because the ordinance was there. But what the ordinance did was it kept out non-retail businesses, so the spaces that are intended for retail could be there when we developed to the point that we were ready for the businesses to come.
The retail core on Manchester, this mix of unique businesses, have been a huge catalyst for Maplewood's revitalization. And it's something that's been made easier by the city government.
The city, which streamlined the business license application process, a business can come to Maplewood and instantaneously get their license. And in the cases where you need a conditional use permit, like a restaurant, they've got it down to 6 weeks, whereas in other communities it could be 3 or 4 months.
Our cinnamon chip, white, honey wheat, or cinnamon swirl.
Steve Jawar recently moved his bakery, Great Harvest, to Maplewood from Olivet.
Do you want a bag for this at all, Jimmy? And as you know, in this current environment, it's very difficult to run a business, and we struggled over there. and they even helped us with some signage reimbursement and forgivable loans. And if not for all that, it would have been probably difficult to move our business.
What's interesting is that you have all these small businesses, and they depend on each other.
While every neighborhood story is different, the most important takeaway is the potential.
Rebound neighborhoods are possible.
And that the St. Louis region has a sizable number of neighborhoods that in the past 25 years, perhaps surprising number, that have under clear objective criteria have significantly improved while becoming more diverse.
For Stay Tuned, I'm Anne-Marie Berger.
Well, how many times have you heard it? I love the neighborhood, but when my kids get old enough to go to school, I think I'm going to have to move somewhere else. I don't think you hear that in Maplewood, Richmond Heights. And I think the way you used to, I think it was a community where the schools were, well, you were skirting the issue of accreditation. Karen Hall's the superintendent of the Maplewood, Richmond Heights School District, a place that is something we don't hear about much, and that is a school district that has turned itself around and brought itself back. How important is quality schools? I think I know the answer to this.
Yes.
Quality schools, good schools, to a community and stabilizing a community.
Absolutely. Well, it's critical. Schools are an essential part of a community. And one way I like to describe Maplewood Richmond Heights School District is that we have transformed. We had that period in time where things were very challenging. However, the community came together. It was a level of collaboration. I like to say that the city and the school district have a symbiotic relationship.
As they always should, but they don't always. Right?
No, they don't. And I credit that collaboration and that symbiotic relationship to where we are today, as we're both, moving forward and we're seeing and experiencing this level of success. But schools are critical. People want to be proud of their neighborhood school. I believe people want a strong neighborhood school.
Yeah, but the question is, how do you do it? And I think that's, and I imagine you have people coming to you all the time saying, how did you do this? Now, Linda Hankey was the superintendent who a lot of people have given credit for really beginning this turnaround. You've stepped in to continue this, but how many people are coming to you saying, how did you do it, how did you do it?
Well, it's interesting. Yes, they do. Of course they do. And there's different elements there that we consider. The main thing that we like to take credit for is our size. We're a very small district. And so we are able to say, with, of course, the input of our community, okay, we want this particular program, we're going to make it happen. And we don't spend a lot of time deliberating, we do it. So that was one of the main factors. We used our small size, our ability to engage with our stakeholders to say we're going to dig our heels in and we're going to bring about this change.
But it couldn't have been easy.
No, not at all.
No, there's always conflict, there's always problems, there's always people angry with what's being done.
Yeah, well, you can't make everyone happy. However, we have to do what's best for the children, ultimately. And when my predecessor, Dr. Hankey, was leading this school district, it was not easy for her. And she's a brilliant woman, and she had a lot of courage to say, we need to do certain things. We had to get facilities in line, we had to look at staffing, and we had to change our curriculum. And because of our small size, we were able to make those dramatic changes and transform ourselves to where we are today.
And here's the key in my mind. This is a diverse school district. Racial breakdown, basically? What is it?
Well, it depends upon how you look at diversity.
Sure.
Racial,
and economic diversity.
And that's really what we look at. Racial diversity, it's primarily white and black. We're getting more other nationalities, but it's not that diverse in terms of our student population.
But here's the question I really want to get to, and I think we're going to talk about it tonight, and they talked about it a little bit in Anne-Marie's package. Do we believe today, as many people did not believe before, that you can have a stable, mixed-race community? That is, what people used to talk about integration, I don't think they believed it could really happen. We don't really use the term much. Now we say diverse. Can it be stable and successful?
Look at us. I believe so. And maybe I'm an idealist, but that's one of the things that draws many people to the community now. And I like to call MRH, Maplewood Richmond Heights, the destination school district. People are coming to us because they want that diversity.
You know, when we started this off, and I want to mention this, I used the term, there goes the neighborhood, which is often used as a punchline. It was not used as a punchline before. People meant it. Here comes the first black family, there goes the neighborhood. They really meant it. And yet today, the irony in my mind is that that's a strength now. It's not changing, but diversity is not seen as a decline, but an improvement.
We embrace our diversity. And again, your definition of diversity, it can be race and also economics, especially in MRH. It's a very dichotomous school district in terms of economics, and it has its own set of challenges, but we embrace that. And the staff that we have, and again, the families that are drawn to the school district like that.
We're going to find out more about this diversity question. We're also going to find out about microbreweries later, because that's a topic that's close to my heart, and Maplewoods as well. So Karen Hall, Superintendent, Maplewood Richmond Heights, thanks for coming on and stick with us. Great, thanks. I know they've always said it takes a village, it takes a community. Let's say that, and that's what we're going to talk about. Again, a lot of times we've talked about the urban core on this program, and it's an important issue, and we'll continue to talk about that. The thing about neighborhoods, and that is, we're really talking about the entire region. Everybody's got a neighborhood, and everybody's got many of the same concerns, although not necessarily the same resources. So joining me is Katrina Summer, Housing Programs Manager from St. Louis County, also Treasurer of the Brentwood School District. And Katrina, you've worked a lot in North County, Wellston, Lee May, some of your work.
Yes.
Stephen Acree, Executive Director and President of RISE Community Development. Patty Gregory is a Belleville community volunteer, which sort of underestimates the fact that she's the Executive Director of the Art on the Square, which is a huge success. Will you do that as a volunteer?
Yes.
Well,
we're all volunteers.
Yeah, well, thanks. Belleville is very fortunate. And Joan Adelson, Executive Director of the Afton Chamber of Commerce. So, Joan, we throw out Afton. People talk about, oh, Soulard, that's a great place in the Central West End. What's happening in Afton? I mean, how do you relate to the things that are being talked about here in terms of building a community not for the past, but for the future?
Well, we look at the fact that we have a lot of seniors, and so the seniors don't want to leave the area that they have lived in. So we have several new places that retirement centers, assisted living, memory care. So they're moving to there, which frees up the homes that they're moving from for the startup family.
Yeah, because generally an aging population is seen as a problem. Can we look at that as a resource?
Right. Well, it sounds like in Afton it does, and I've seen this in South St. Louis too, where in that generational change, then those are the opportunities for younger people to come in and buy homes and become the next generation. We were sort of stuck in a period for a while where we just had an aging population. Now we have sort of the aging population with a younger generation moving into neighborhoods that they feel they have a better sense of community in.
Mm-hmm. And Patty, Belleville, I've gone there periodically. In my years in St. Louis, it has always had a reputation of being an old and solid community. What are the I'll say the challenges of maintaining that? Because there's also great growth in the Belleville area. So how do you have that growth and still maintain that sense of neighborhood and community in a place like Belleville?
Well, you know, I find Belleville to be very unique in the fact that from the history of the town, people were instilled with a sense of volunteerism and community spirit. And I've lived in several cities, also in Chicago, and one thing that I've noticed about Belleville is that the people all help each other. They're very proud of their heritage. They're very proud of their success.
So this is really for all of you guys, I'm guessing, that it's not just the art on the square, and it's not just one thing. It's the entire community that pitches in here. Now, when we did the Northside Regeneration Project, all of the tweets said, "Oh, you got to listen to the community. You got to listen to the community." So, Katrina, you're dealing with some challenging areas, I think. I've done some stories in Spanish Lake. It has its problems as a post-war declining suburban area, and yet it also has very strong community organization. How do you get these folks to get together in a place like Spanish Lake or some of the other places that you guys are working, where everybody, they don't have to be on the same page, maybe they just have to be on the same table?
What we're doing right now in Spanish Lake is forming a community development corporation where we're really encouraging residents and members of local governments to come together to really discuss what's going on with the community, what the community wants, where it's going, and then to facilitate some of the changes through the government funding.
Do you find that you find the community's willing to come together? I mean, can you do something if you don't have people on board?
Not successfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a key ingredient, and I think it makes the difference between between neighborhoods that do go through this rebound or start to thrive is that you've got community there that's really invested, and that they're committed to that. If you have apathy, it's very hard to get that to sort of produce that. You've got to really have that come from inside the community to say, we really want to have change here.
I totally agree with what you say, Steve. And I think one of the great examples in Belleville is the fact that Lindenwood University came about 10 years to our community, and that actually was started as a grassroots movement from a group of ladies that belonged to the Belleville Heritage Society, and they started a letter writing campaign with the help of the Mark Kern, who is now the county board chair for St. Clair County. And that's actually what attracted Lindenwood to come to Belleville in the first place. And now we have a very thriving section of our West Main corridor because of all their investments into the community and the support of the community for Lindenwood.
I'm wondering, when you listen to people, and I know it sounds great, we need to listen to people, we need to listen to people. Do people really know what's best? I mean, if you're asking me, I'm going to say, well, this is what I want. I know what I want. Give me that. I'm done. So how do you deal with those sorts of things?
Yes, we do, because we have a lot of vacancies, and people complain about this all the time, and yet I tell them, if you go up any main street, you're going to see a lot of vacancies, because we're an older community, there's not a lot of parking.
You're talking
business community,
right,
yes. So
right.
the people complain like, oh, why don't we get this, why don't we get that? My question back to them is usually, where would you put that? Here's the vacancies. We have all the commercial property online on our website so that people can look at it. So where are you going to put a business that needs 90,000 square feet when the biggest thing we have is 18,000 square feet?
I wonder sometimes, and I know, having lived in University City and heard the stories about how people wanted it to be what it used to be. We want a dress shop, and this one, Joe Edwards was going for a liquor license, right? Well, we want a dress shop, we want a bakery, we want a shoe store, we want the Wellston Loop to come back. How can you convince people, or maybe they're right, but that you can't bring back what used to be and you need to look forward, when not knowing what looking forward is going to bring?
That's actually something that we try to put a lot of work into, and what that is part of our mission is to provide data to people and get we call it democratizing data. And so when you work in the community, one of the elements of it is getting people to understand what their situation is in comparison to the market as a whole. And so, if somebody says, I want a grocery store, you can go through the process of saying, well, this is what it takes to support a grocery store in a community. And I think if you give people an opportunity to participate that way, they're pretty smart. And they'll adjust what they think can happen and start to incrementally grow towards that instead of thinking that is the first thing that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm going.
And I'd also like to add that you can really help form the vision of people if you really get them together, talk about their ideas, and then put it on a drawing board for them so they can see what it is that they've said they wanted and what that looks like. In a lot of our communities, we host charrettes through our nonprofit organizations for people to come together and then have drawing boards for what their vision looks like.
You got to be willing to deal with the conflict, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. We're going to talk in just a moment about sometimes outsiders are looking for things that we sort of take for granted, and we also we're going to talk about microbreweries in just a moment. So stick around with us. Thanks. And joining us now, Anthony Bartlett, president of St. Louis Transplants. We're not talking the medical industry here. We're talking about people moving in from the outside. You help them look for what they want, adapt, individuals, families, businesses, that sort of thing?
Correct. So what we do is we help anybody moving to town or an institution or corporation that's bringing a population to town find their network and find their network quickly. So we do churches, country clubs, schools, play dates, dinner parties, golfing buddies, and then a big part of what we do is help them find the right neighborhood.
I guess everybody's looking for something different, or maybe not, but has it surprised you what people are looking for? People always used to, you would hear, well, I asked the real estate agent, I wanted to buy a house here, and they kept showing me a house over there and that kind of stuff. Are people maybe more interested in things that native St. Louisans may not be interested in?
There's no question. There's no question. And I think in large part, the real estate industry is doing its best to try to catch up to that theme going on with new arrivals, and people from around the country are often, for an example, people in a lot of other cities are defined by their neighborhood. So in St. Louis, sometimes, we hear historically they're defined by the high school, but people coming from New York or say, my folks came from Cleveland, and I don't think I've ever heard them say Cleveland. They said, we came from Shaker Heights. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody is moving to St. Louis, what they're actually looking for is a neighborhood community. And I think a lot of the resources have gone to finding the right home, but not necessarily the right community for them. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to do, to make sure that they see those pockets and know that they're there.
Some people are looking for Wildwood, and some people are looking for Soulard.
Correct. And I think there's something appropriate for everyone. I think what's happening, and one of the things that we saw a lot of for the out-of-towners coming into town is, I had no idea this was here. When we started hosting events, our first event was in the Grove neighborhood, and 75 people walked in the door and went, wow, I really wish I had known that the Grove neighborhood existed. When I arrived, I was shown, they took me to a baseball game and then drove me, straight out here, and I didn't know about all these different pieces. And this reminds me of home. I think the transplants and new arrivals really go based on feel and what is reminiscent of where they're coming from, and that's where they like to land.
What are some of the more popular areas that you're hearing about, or is it still all over the place?
It really depends on what they're looking for, but one of
age and family,
and things of that nature. I'd say a big piece of it is a lot of the transplants, I think, feel like they missed the renaissance, so to speak, or the rebound in a lot of these big cities. And what a lot of the transplants really love about St. Louis is they can participate in that. So for example, we had a transplant from New York come in, and she found Cherokee Street, and she said, I missed Brooklyn. I didn't get to be a part of that renaissance, but I get to be a part of that here in St. Louis. And not only did she get to be a part of that, but she called 3 other folks from New York, her age, in their 20s, and said, "You won't believe what's going on here. You guys got to join me and become a part of it."
Do you have a sense that the people who are moving in, whether it's tech workers or people who are moving here because their wife wants to move home or their husband wants to, are they having an impact on what's going on throughout the area? Is this a big enough group of people that they're beginning to shift some things in areas?
I think that they are having an impact, and they are absolutely the heart and soul of the impact that's possible. The transplants are not afraid. They're not afraid of diversity. They're not afraid of being a part of, say, an early rebound. And that's definitely a key component. We need to bring as many of them as possible.
Are we using the right techniques? Are we promoting the right things, do you think? Or?
I think in some cases, we try to do, I think we're still depending a lot on luck. So for example, if a transplant lands in, say, somewhere like Lafayette Square, they'll be adopted by all the neighbors instantly. Whereas in another neighborhood that might be a little more established, the neighbors do not get to know each other. So what we try to do is take the luck out of it and make sure that they know that X is an option and Y is an option, and that Z, while it might be close to work, is it is what it is. It's maybe appropriate for a family, maybe appropriate for this, but...
And yet some people are looking for the challenge, right? Some people want to go in.
Some people love the challenge. Some people love the challenge, exactly. And I think there are people in the community who are surprised by that. So if the real estate agent is not looking for a challenge, what's important is that they need to understand or be able to refer the person to a place where they maybe can be challenged. So they might go, "Oh wow, you can't move there, you have a child." And the New Yorker's going, or just say somebody from Queens is going, but I want that. I want that mix. I want that diversity. I want that craziness.
Once again, it comes back to diversity. A lot of different neighborhoods, a lot of different areas. There's probably something for everybody. We just have to make sure that we can pair them up with the right place.
We have to make sure that it's not hidden and that they find these pockets, exactly. I think they're seeing downtown, and they might see an area, say, as large as St. Charles, and they're missing what's in between sometimes. Again, this is all very fixable. We're certainly, that's changing very much, but it's a huge component. If they land in the wrong neighborhood, if we have a round peg in a square hole, it's very, very hard to overcome. And I think we see a lot of loss because of it for that reason. When you have the 30-year-old from Spain who's put out in the county because he thinks he has to live right next to work, and then you've got the nice young family from Cincinnati living on Locust, those things are hard to overcome. We get one shot. And so what we try to do is make sure that they see it from the beginning and they can land in those places, and then they can sort of make their way.
Great. Anthony Bartlett from St. Louis Transplants. Thanks. Interesting perspective.
Thanks
Join
for
the
having
conversation, our conversation, the Twitter conversation. Stay tuned. STL. We'll be talking beer in just a moment. So here's one of the things that the study about rebounding neighborhoods found. Not in every neighborhood, but in a number of neighborhoods. One of the factors in those neighborhoods was a microbrewery. There was a time when bringing a bar into a neighborhood was seen as a bad sign. I'm thinking a microbrewery has slightly, if not radically, different sense for people today. Joining me is Florian Coupland, brewmaster, co-founder of Urban Chestnut Brewing. Phil Wymore from Perennial Artisan Ales in the Patch neighborhood, and we'll talk about that. Fran Caradonna from O'Fallon Brewery, original founder, current GM, and you're moving from O'Fallon to Maryland Heights.
We're expanding. We're going to maintain our presence in O'Fallon. We don't know what that looks like yet, but excited to be adding presence in Maryland Heights.
So how do you choose? And Maryland Heights, and forgive me for the Maryland Heights people, I don't have a sense of a center of Maryland Heights, a downtown, as you would in Belleville or in Maplewood or in University City. So how do you choose a site for for a microbrewery, and is it a chicken and egg? Do you begin the development, or do you pick the hot spot and move into it?
You know, we were looking for the right configuration, and that included what the building looked like, the space, the proximity to highways, the neighborhoods, the other businesses nearby, and where our current customers lived. And trying to find, we have customers all over the area, St. Charles, St. Louis, the city, and we really looked for a central place so that we could be close to as many of our customers as possible. So.
Florian, you're on excuse me, Washington Avenue. You've expanded or are expanding into the Grove, right on Manchester. As part of this, I'll call it a development trend, because I know it's a business trend. I know there's something else going on, but this is really about neighborhoods now. And so I'll have to say, I lived in Munich for a while, where beer garden culture is very strong. It's really nice to see that come back, a place where people can come and have a drink, and it's not a tavern.
It's definitely fun. I'm originally from outside of Munich, and growing up, my parents took us to beer gardens in the summer all the time, and it was kind of a coming together, having food and drinks and meeting friends, and looking at what St. Louis used to be. There's lots of pictures of people enjoying themselves in beer gardens from 100 years ago, and it's fun to be able to slightly bring that back.
So how does that affect Phil or Florian or any of you? That creation or really transformation of a neighborhood when you bring in a microbrewery? I mean, it's not just a restaurant. I mean, it's a restaurant, but it's more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a cultural thing. You know, I'd say more than anything. You know, you mentioned bringing a bar into a neighborhood. The perception that creates, but. There's something that's very different about the craft brewing scene. It's.
I assume that was true. Has there been opposition? People saying we don't want this?
Not in our neighborhood.
Not in yours, right?
It was very welcome. We're not the types of establishments that stay open, until 3 a.m. and and there's bar fights and things like that. It's really more about people. That enjoy a sensory experience. They enjoy tasting different things. They enjoy variety. They enjoy some of the finer things in life, and that's what we try to produce on the level of beer.
Now, you're in the Patch neighborhood, right? Far South St. Louis?
Correct.
Why there? I mean, that's not the first place I would think where we'd be going for, for a beer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of factors. I think Fran touched on that as well. The building itself had to be a good fit for us in terms of manufacturing, and sort of a mixed model where we have a retail space as well, proximity to highway and things like that. And the neighborhood too didn't have a lot of walking traffic, and so retail space is a little bit less expensive, which was good for us, as a startup company. But it's also exciting to connect with other business owners in our neighborhood and realize that we're contributing something and providing value and creating something in that space.
Did it surprise you guys to find out that the professors researching this found out that microbreweries were a common factor? Not everywhere, but not an unusual thing to find a microbrewery in a rebounding neighborhood.
Beer is a social beverage, and it kind of draws people in, and hopefully we bring people to neighborhoods, and from there kind of help grow and develop that neighborhood, and I think it's really fun to be part of that.
Yeah, which comes first? Again, is it the neighborhood that you're looking for, or the building you're looking for, and you hope the neighborhood kind of follows around?
It is building, because you have certain requirements for the building, but I mean, for us, we definitely looked at different neighborhoods and definitely made a choice to pick the Grove for our second location in Midtown here for the first one, specifically based on what else is going on and the development in those neighborhoods.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Washington Avenue is really have a neighborhood feel, but certainly the expansion is part of the neighborhood. Does it create, do you get a sense that people in the neighborhood or in the larger community feel, hey, this is our brewery?
Absolutely. When we went to O'Fallon 14 years ago, the city, the government, the citizens rallied around and have been so proud of the brewery, of the fact that O'Fallon has a brewery, and they've also been so supportive for so many years, and it's been a real positive and powerful experience for all of us.
What are the factors of success besides making good beer?
That's number one.
And again, you know, it's a restaurant, right? It's location, location, location. But in this case, it seems to be a little different than that. You're not picking the busiest corner, right? What are you looking for?
I mean, I think, you know, in our case, you know, we needed a place to manufacture, and we were hoping that people would come down and see us. You know, we're pleasantly surprised at how, you know, how business had responded. You know, in the couple of years that we've been open, it's been growing. But you know, there was uncertainty there. We didn't know if people would come down and see us at the rate that they had. So it was, you know, that was a pleasant surprise.
How much cooperation then, as you move into an area, whether it's Maryland Heights or Patch or the Grove, how much are you then working with the rest of that business or the neighborhood organizations? How is it important for you to become part of that broader community and even maybe talk about school issues or crime issues certainly? How important is that for you guys to take an active role in what's happening or not happening in that neighborhood?
Well, I think it's critical. You know, looking at Maryland Heights, we're going to be right across from Westport. And, you know, and our goal is to bring people to the neighborhood, to the area, stop, visit, take a tour, try some beer, and then move on to some of the other locations that are nearby. And hopefully bring some folks by that may not have been in that area before.
Now, this is not a joke. How important is public transportation for a microbrewery?
I think it is important. I'm hoping for more development in that area. We're certainly closer now than, or fairly close now, closer than in our our first location.
I mean, I've joked with people that I know the 97 bus will take me home from Urban Chestnut. And that's not a joke.
It's an important consideration if people are going to be how they get to and from. You know, however that transportation happens, it's an important consideration for all of us.
Yeah, but then again, that brings up this other issue that you're looking at broader community issues like things like public transportation. And again, you hope for some walk-in business. I'm not sure in Maryland Heights if people are going to be walking in business like they might in the Patch neighborhood, right?
We get a little bit of that. And interestingly, we're in a mixed-use building too, so there's residents that actually live in the building above the brewery, which is you know, I think a pretty nice perk for the people that live in that building. You know, there's I mean, not everybody that lives in our building chose it because there's a microbrewery downstairs, but some of them did, and they really like that benefit a lot.
Well, I have to say I'm going to have to continue my research on each of your places sometime after the show as the months continue and the spring comes and the beer garden's open. We'll be back. It's a serious issue. It's fascinating to find out, in fact, that this trend is also tied to some other trends that are going on in this city. So if you stick around and join us a little bit later on, we're going to have the smart guys, the experts, the professors here in just a moment, and we'll talk a little bit about some of that research and what's going on. So stick around. Okay, so we're going to go up to this higher level and we're going to talk about some of the research and some of the applications maybe of that research. Natalie Self, Strategic Initiatives Manager with Beyond Housing. We've had you on. Todd Swanstrom, UMSL Public Policy, who did the study we're talking about. Andy Theising, my old friend from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. And Tom Pickle, President, Executive Director of RISE Community Housing Corporation. I'm fascinated by this.
Excuse me, Jim,
I'm sorry.
I'm with DeSales Community Housing Corporation.
Okay. I got that. I'm going to write that down. Here's the fascinating question that I have, because in the past, I did a story years ago where I think it was Ray Suarez at the time I was interviewing, because he had just written a book called The Neighborhood, The Old Neighborhood. And he said in the 60s, in the 70s, no one believed that there could be a stable, integrated neighborhood. It was either white or black, or changing from white to black. I'd like to think that was changed. It has changed. Todd, has it changed? Is it changing? Can we point to communities that say these are stable, diverse, or integrated communities?
Well, that is one of the results of our research. You know, that when we found these rebound neighborhoods, one of the things we did is we started to look inside of them. What are they like? And what we found is that they're surprisingly diverse, economically
some people are
and
looking,
racially.
Some people are looking for that now.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think the evidence is clear. The millennial generation has different attitudes about race than the older generation, frankly, than our generation.
Right.
I really think it is. It's changed, and therefore, young people are looking for a place that has an edge to it, that has some vitality. They find that stimulating. It's not a negative. Once again, I don't think I'm going to be too simplistic to say that race has gone away, right? But it's really different, especially for millennials, I think.
Yeah, Jim, I heard you ask that question earlier, and I just thought the answer is emphatically yes. There are integrated, stable neighborhoods where my organization has worked for a long time in the Fox Park and Tower Grove East neighborhoods in South St. Louis. I think, going back 10, 12, 15 years ago, it reached a point of stability and sustainability and integration to the point where today, the fact that African American family might move into a block is not a cause for panic at all. In fact, as you suggest, it's something that people are really looking for. And another neighborhood that we've been working in Botanical Heights, which has undergone more of a complete redevelopment. I'm quite sure, and I can't cite the statistics, but is more integrated today than before that redevelopment took place. So I think there are living examples that answer your question.
And University City, I think, is a story
yes,
of a community, as in Oak Park in Chicago, where they said, okay, it's going to stop here, we're going to do some new things. Not totally successful, but still, that's that same story. I think you could look at that as a success, and maybe so much of a success that people have forgotten about it. Andy, in your work, especially on the east side, do you find some of these similar trends? Are we talking about besides two different states, two different attitudes or regions, or is the same that you see the same things happening there?
Well, I think that,
and again, it's a very diverse area, right?
It is a diverse area, and there certainly are pockets that are not diverse, but I think we see that rebound happening on both sides of the river, and I think it's because attitudes are changing with time. And I think in the last 20 years, isolation is I think we've determined that isolation is bad, and that we don't want to be isolated. We don't want to be isolated from other people. We don't want to be isolated from resources. We want to be able to go to these fun places and experience fun that maybe we didn't grow up with.
Yeah, and again, I want to go back to the work, Todd, that we're not talking about entire communities, except perhaps we used Maplewood as an example, but sometimes it's little sections of a community. Natalie, in the work that you do, we always, again, I'm going to ask this question again. People say we need to listen to the community. Do this community really know what they want, or they just want what I want? Don't give me that. I don't want that. And that's all I have to tell you.
One of the things that I really appreciated that Stephen, I believe, shared earlier in the hour was talking about the important role of data. And it seems like his experience seems to mimic ours at Beyond Housing. And so as we follow our process of ask, align, and act, where we ask the community what they want to see, and then we align projects and resources and act, we have found that conversation, that data, that just as Stephen said, people are smart, but people are also level-headed enough to understand that if this is the reality of how much a single family house is going to cost, and this is how much money we really have, and this is what the gap is. And then you engage them in an authentic conversation about, so should we raise the money to fill that gap, or should we build a different housing product so the gap is smaller? People are very reasonable and will often make the decision that's best for the entire community, and what their neighbors are saying is absolutely possible, and it needs to be done.
But you need to get them involved in the conversation early. You can't come to them with a plan and say, what do you think of this plan? You know, you get to complain about the plan. No, the idea is that you need to be upfront. Let's talk about what this community needs first.
And it needs to be a conversation. And I think Natalie hit the nail on the head. It's got to be more than just ask and answer. It's a conversation. It's a dialogue. Correct. It's a back and forth, and dig a few questions deep and really get to those root issues, because there's compromise.
And it's relationship building. The relationship needs to happen before the plan happens. People are very suspicious, as perhaps they should be, of when you come in and say, I want to help you and I want to work with you, and there's no relationship there. So organizations and developers that can make connections and partners with key informants in a community are well served to do so.
Let's, Todd, I want to ask you, because I think people might be wondering, and I think there's some tweets we've gotten where it's like, okay, maybe you found a few places, right? Good for us. We've got a few places. But overall, it looks pretty bad, and the decay is rampant, and you've found a half a dozen places that are doing well.
Well, in our case, it's not a half a dozen. In fact, I think the number is 42 out of 218 census tracts we defined as rebound. You know, I think
which doesn't mean the rest are not. Some of those are just stable. Right?
That's right. Some of them are stable, and some of them are in rough shape. I would submit that economic integration is tougher in many ways than racial and ethnic integration today, because we have such tremendous economic inequality. That's the real tough issue, is how do you get mixed income communities? And by the way, a lot of the communities we're looking at are somewhat mixed economically, right?
Yeah, and I want to ask about the housing approach, because the suburban post-war suburban development, so much of that was economically segregated. Forget race for the moment.
Right.
The housing prices were at this level, you can move in here. If you can't buy in here, but if you go to older communities, even in my own neighborhood, well, down here are the 4 families, then the 2 families, then the single families, and up here on the hill are the mansions. That's pretty common in older areas like Maplewood, University City, and South St. Louis. Right?
Yeah, it is, and certainly in the Botanical Heights neighborhood where we've been working for the last 9 years or so, we've really seen that develop through the new development that's taking place, you know, incorporating the older buildings as well, that we and the developers that have been building in the area, and more recently UIC, a dynamic small development company, really are trying to create that stair step of housing opportunities within a neighborhood. The starter home, the second home, and then a larger new home, such as
and you can stay in the same neighborhood. You don't have to move 50 miles away, right?
And we have new tools or tools that are perhaps new to St. Louis that can help support that. So Beyond Housing has a supporting organization called the 24/1 Community Land Trust. And so the idea of a land trust is that this organization owns the land under houses, so that we just built 30 plus homes in Pine Lawn, homes that might be valued at over $100,000, and folks can buy them for $75,000 to $80,000. So there are tools that we can start deploying around the region to help those housing products become more affordable for families that we know need them.
We're bringing in everybody else here, so feel free to join in. Todd, I wanted to ask you about the very usefulness of the study that you've done. Is this something that, if I'm in a neighborhood that I would like to help see, be turned around, can I look at this and actually use this? Or is everybody different? You know, every neighborhood is different, and you can't apply one to the other.
Well, I think the answer is yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
You need both. I mean, you need to look at the broader dynamics of the region and the city, but every neighborhood is different. And we've now, in the city of St. Louis, we've created this market value analysis. Stephen might be able to say a few words about it, that allows you to look at the neighborhood in pretty micro areas, right? And what you see in parts of St. Louis is tremendous variation. And one of the things we do in community development, we talk about building from strength. Where are the anchors, where are the strength, and build out from that. And that's an effective way to do neighborhood revitalization.
So the market value analysis really takes a cluster of factors in looking at an area from property values and vacancy and building conditions and income. So it's a cluster analysis to sort of do a typology of an area to say this is this kind of area. It's where it fits in the economy, where it fits in the market, and by doing that, you can better sort of in a more informed way start to figure out, well, what needs to happen there for that specific, community. This is where it is, so what do you need to do there, instead of just kind of guessing at it.
And the data doesn't tell you what to do. The citizens need to engage with the data. The data is a tool that helps you to think about your place.
Well, and one thing that I was thinking about as I was listening to our conversation is that we're talking about neighborhood revitalization and neighborhood development, and I just sort of want to put out for everyone, which I think is clear, and I just want to make this extra clear, is that even in places that look like there isn't a strong, vibrant neighborhood and community, there still is. People still live there. There's a network. People are getting together at their houses and talking about basketball wives, or whatever people are talking about.
I always tell people that you've got to go to a neighborhood at 7 o'clock in the morning. And that's when you see how much life there is, because sometimes in the middle of the day there's nobody there and it looks like there's nothing going on. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm just curious about the hopefulness. You talk about acres, and I know as I read it, sometimes it's a church or a couple of churches in a neighborhood. And again, some of your neighborhoods were not neighborhoods that were rebounding, but not going down as fast as some of the other neighborhoods. And it's interesting to be able to look at those kinds of factors. What other factors should we be looking at? As let's say as a resident, if I want to stabilize, if I want to keep the neighborhood going, what should we be looking at? Should we be looking at art fairs? Should we be looking at microbreweries? Should we be looking at block organizations?
Clearly beer is doing something right.
Well, that's because you shouldn't sit at home and drink alone.
Well, I think you should look at the citizens and whether they are talking to each other, when they are getting together, because and whether they're telling a story about their place, which is a positive story, not a story of decline. Every communities have to believe in themselves. It has to start from inside the community, and so it's all about the citizens and their ability to engage. And I also think institutions. We have a network of community development corporations, which are grassroots groups that are committed to a geography, that have members of the board from the neighborhood and have members of the board who are experts in the whole process of community development, and those are important too. Institutions are important as well.
But we were so intent on doing something that would bring recognition to our community that the whole community actually had the emotional buy-in of the event. And I think one thing that
you've got to get people to drive, if you want outsiders, to drive away from that interstate and find Belleville, right?
Exactly, because we're competing with, the big box stores. We're more mom and pop. We're competing with the highway. And we really have had to reinvent ourselves. We're a 200-year-old community. This year, a celebration of 250 in St. Louis. And so we really have had to find creative ways to reinvent ourselves. And I think with people feeling a part of a community and getting on the bandwagon with that makes a huge difference in revitalization and economic development.
It makes all the difference. It's the social culture of a neighborhood. There are neighborhoods where the neighbors know each other, and there are neighborhoods where the neighbors don't know each other. And the neighborhoods where they know each other, they're the ones that are on the rebound. I see it all the time. I see people move in and then they leave, and what is the number one reason why they leave? The neighbor didn't come over and say hello. The neighbor didn't bring over a bottle of wine. And the neighborhoods where that's happening are, I think, starting to really see the benefit. They're starting to see the importance of knowing who's next door, and those are where you're seeing where the big shift is happening.
This is such a big picture question. I mean, this is really old-fashioned stuff. This is the way old neighborhoods used to be. And we still have air conditioning, and we don't have porches, although there's a lot of neighborhoods that don't have a lot of air conditioning and do have porches, and they're sitting out there. So you see that. I just wonder if are we just being nostalgic for the old days, or are we actually seeing the old days becoming new days?
I don't think it's just a matter of being nostalgic, and I think that community building is taking new forms. I think the one real remarkable development in recent times has been the community gardening movement. In several of the neighborhoods we work in, the community garden has become really the gathering place for many of the people in the neighborhood where they do get to know each other, and I think that's a really important aspect.
So we're going back to that. The city that plays together will work together, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And an example of some new types of community development are websites like Nextdoor. So these are websites where people have their own social network, essentially, of their residents. And in my neighborhood in University City, I live in Music neighborhood, and we have a Nextdoor site. And probably half of the posts are lost my dog, stray cat, and sometimes we joke about that and their relative value, and I still think they're important because people are getting the opportunity to be recognized, they're getting the opportunity to share things that are important to themselves, and so it's like we're sitting on the front porch, but I'm sitting at a coffee shop and someone's sitting at work, and so that's a new exciting development for us.
Well, I think this is a great point that we tend to, sometimes there's this idea that virtual communities are replacing face-to-face communities. But as you point out, the web can actually be a tool to enhance face-to-face relationships in community, right? And people still crave those face-to-face relationships. You can't develop the kind of trust that you need. You need to look somebody in the face and, see whether they're real or not, and you're not going to develop that online. So neighborhoods are as important as ever, even in an age when you can go online and connect with somebody on the other side of the earth, right? And that's great in its own way, but it's not replacing face-to-face relationships.
Yeah, we'll never lose the sense of physical place. I mean, you still got to live somewhere, right?
I think St. Louis, though, has had an interesting problem. The place is so convenient, and it's so easy to get to where you're going. The neighbors have not had to meet one another the same way that they have to in some of these other cities. That you lock yourself out, or you need to get somewhere. Mom and Dad are on Long Island, and you're in the city. You're talking about hours of driving. In St. Louis, Uncle Bob's is 6 minutes away. So they haven't.
That's a long drive.
So
right?
they haven't. So they're kind of, they come in, and the natives are going, why do I have to know these folks? I have 10 emergency phone calls who could all be here in 5 minutes. And so that's part of what we need to do is sort of, in certain pockets, we are starting to see that happen, and they need to understand that that is a key component, and so it's not always St. Louisans' fault, but
But sometimes.
sometimes.
We find in Afton it's a large area, so it's subdivisions that seem to get together, and we try to bring them together every year at Afton Day so that they can all get together, watch the parade, come to the festival, that they can meet people from another subdivision, people they went to school with, because it seems like most everybody has some connection to Afton. They went to school there, their parents live there, so it's sort of a come back home and see your neighbors and meet the people that you haven't seen.
Is there an anchor institution or business or
there's
place?
There's several of the churches that have been really big anchors. Place-wise, probably the bread company is the newest, latest place where everybody seems to meet.
What I think has been really important for the city of Belleville and also the whole Metro East side of the river is that I think people are beginning to think more regionally. And I think for years, and maybe this was just my point of view from living on the, quote, other side, that people did not think they thought of the Mississippi River as a separation. And now I think people in communities, and maybe a big part of it is the internet and people cooperating with other social services across the river and different organizations. But I think the fact that we are all thinking more regionally has actually improved the whole economy on both sides of the river and development in communities.
It's an interesting point, because we're talking about improving relationships with our neighbors at the same time as we're thinking regionally.
Well, it's sort of like, if we develop the region, are we somehow overlooking neighborhoods? And done right, regional collaboration strengthens neighborhoods because it gives you access to resources. For example, the Great Rivers Greenway, and the whole system of trails, which is uniting people. Instead of seeing the rivers as a divider, they can actually be seen as a uniter, and that just knits the neighborhoods together. So no neighborhood can succeed as an island. No neighborhood is going to succeed if it views itself only as an island. You've got to connect to the resources in the region. You've got to connect to the jobs.
I'm fascinated by the Twitter comment we got, though, that, and I passed it on, that the sense was you guys are talking about these isolated things when we all know that St. Louis is just in total decline and the urban areas are empty and gone. That's how people see things. Well, no, I know, but I mean that's the attitude, and I don't know where the.
But that's okay. Embrace that. Don't sell. We're not New York. We're not Chicago.
Right.
We're not. That's okay. That's okay. Flip it on its head and say, and I think that's the problem. We're trying to say
5 acres.
We're trying to
from,
say
Paul
Washington
McGee, right?
Avenue is Chicago, and it's not. But it's the beginning of something, and you can participate and see the impact you make in that.
Yeah.
And if you sell it that way, I don't think you'll get the same resistance.
And I think that's one of the beauties of St. Louis is that there's so much there to discover. You have to go there and look, and you will find great things. And if
not in your face, right?
someone who chooses to isolate will only see the negative, or will only get perhaps some kind of a message that's coming in from the media. But to go out on the street and to connect with people and to be part of meetup groups and neighbor groups, there's a lot of great stuff out there.
And actually we're wrapping this up because we're actually online at this point. But I think the point about the bread company is an interesting point, just like microbreweries. I think bread companies have created community centers. And we think about it as a business, and they're open there and they're open there, but that's where I get some ideas for my stories, from the bread company.
Someone I know.
Yes, exactly.
It used to be the neighborhood tavern served that function in communities. It's where people,
take their bucket and go get their bucket
Right.
of beer.
And if we can bring the beer gardens back, we're there.
Now it's bread company,
Right.
I think it's a little broader. I mean, it's just important to have businesses that you're proud of in your neighborhood. That's what generates
That is right.
conversation. Sometimes that's how it gets the neighbors talking. This new restaurant that opened up down the street, if that's, that can generate a lot of buzz, and that's what can connect people and make people talk about it. And it's, it's all kinds of artisan producers, bakeries, donut shops, whatever it is. But breweries got a lot of focus on this program. But it's all about just having businesses that you're proud of.
I was thinking about, because we're gonna wrap this up. But when Jimmy Stewart comes back, and It's a Wonderful Life to Potterville, and he's running down the street, and it's bar, tavern, dance hall, girls, bar, tavern, dance hall. And I thought, well, that's the fear, that people have, that their nice little shopping district is going to be bar, dance hall, girls. But I think, that was the thing about Joe Edwards. That's why people didn't want a bar. I mean, what's next? A strip joint, right? Well, maybe. Nobody knew for sure, right?
They make a lot of money.
Right. Okay.
Taxes.
Right.